So, everyone here? So I think for the rest of the morning time, I think we should have a group discussion based upon postdoc and also the film Babel. Because there are some themes which Paul has just discussed, which are related to the film, which we saw yesterday, this question of identity, translation.
Don't feel obliged to talk about my film. I think you should have time to talk about mine.
My favorite.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should have time to talk about the film because we
film. So
haven't
basically about the film, but I think that what Paul has just discussed about this mismatch and asymmetrical relationship between East and West are really relevant to the themes of the film yesterday. So basically, we start discussing about the film, but from time to time thinking about the themes of translation.
Excuse me, sorry.
Is it okay?
Yeah, sure.
So about 30 minutes?
Well, maybe a little bit longer. See how it goes. Would you like to do that and just make some comments about the film? Do you want to talk in your tables or just straight together or what?
Yeah, how do you call it the group?
All right, let's do it together because we haven't got so much time. Then, all right. Sorry. Yes, please. Yes, come on.
This is the first impression, the general impression of the movie I had yesterday. It's related with social justice. It is connected with globalization and capitalism.
Yes.
This is the first, I think, is the link between all this story and the great separation between rich country and poor country, and the humanity which came out from people from a human country. And even though they were so generous and so Mexican women, for example, or the other people from Morocco, even though they were so generous, they lose this. They were not winners.
Yes.
In the sense, at the end of the story. This, for me, was the most strong part.
Yes.
And how also the people from, I don't know if you agree about that or what you think about that, the people where the tourists were on the bus, they live, these people, the Bay connection, or the other American in this little village, they were, for me, very selfish. They thought about themselves, and also they didn't want to mix, they didn't ask any help from this, from the people who were available to help them. They rejected their help. They didn't mind. They just thought about themselves.
Yes. Not English, I think, as well as American.
I know all this group, they were French also, it doesn't matter, but they come from Western culture in this sense, and they rejected completely the other culture. And there is another point.
How do we talk large group discussion, group discussion?
Large group.
No, I mean group discussion. Is that what you mean? Because I misunderstood.
Well, I thought that
Group discussion?
you meant whole group, didn't you?
Whole.
Yes. Yes.
So to have group or without, because both say we have no time.
That's what I thought. Yes.
What to do?
Okay. I think it got lost in translation. Sorry, carry on, Marie.
We should have general discussion? Or
I think a general discussion, yes, because I think we'll run out of time.
okay, another, I don't know if someone else wants to ask something about this part, because I noticed another part.
Yeah, okay, well, let's see if anybody wants to follow up on that then. You said something at the beginning when you said none of these good people win out of the situation, none of them gains.
Yeah.
Are there any winners in the film?
Related to this point or others?
Well, I thought it was related to what you said, because you said none of those people win.
Yeah.
So are there any winners?
Yeah, the Western people in this sense, if I can use this word, because their story finished well. In the poor people, I don't think it was a good story. It was not a happy end. The guy died. they were beaten, in Morocco. And the Mexican woman was rejected. They didn't mind at all, the Americans didn't mind at all about her story, humanity, they don't care about her. And she was rejected in the poor words, in this sense.
The reason I asked it is because the film is set up with the American being a victim at the start, isn't it? That's what I want you to...
Yes, this is the contradiction.
Yes.
It's the contradiction. Of course, he started this story about a victim of terrorism, hypothesizing terrorism, was the guy. It was a stupid game to shot, of course. But even this kind of shooting, it was due from ignorance. They were rejected. Why they used this rifle? What for? If nobody explained why it's not right to use it, nobody can really understand the danger. So I don't think it was totally their fault.
But the movie shows that this boy in Morocco and the lady, when she took the children without consent, that they're doing something wrong.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, but the problem was
the others were not doing anything wrong. So I think the way the movie was set up, maybe if the characters of the rich country were doing something wrong.
This is the point. Apparently, for this I started from to say the capitalism. This is a product of capitalism culture. I'm rich, I can spend everything as I want, I can use people in this sense. I don't think they are good people because I'm the best.
Yeah, like how he was so unconcerned about the fact that his son was getting married, but you just have to deal with it, you have to be there.
Yeah.
And then, which forced her to take the children to Mexico and do something that we might think was wrong, but to her that was the only option because she was forced to be in that position by someone who didn't care about her, even though she'd been working with that family for 16 years or whatever.
What do you think about the fact that he's considerate to her because he says, don't worry, change the wedding, I'll pay for it?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Just throwing money at the problem. Very American.
This is very strong.
It's condescending, isn't it? As if a wedding is something you could simply change to another day without affecting people.
Yeah, but you are you, so you can do it.
Yeah.
Look, would you like some more light? Shall I put another light on?
I'd like to make a comment about kind of cinematography, about beyond the content of the movie, and which relates to your paper as well.
Okay.
The perspective of the subject. It's the movie is always based on the individuals, and your paper is also about the subject, which would refer to individuals, but the subject might not be equal to the individuals always.
Yes.
The concept which is changing, and sometimes some research in Kyoto University research about sphere of the subject.
Yes.
Sphere. We can when we find identity, which is not always based on the individuals, which might be based on the tribes, which might be based on the group or community or sphere.
Sphere.
Sphere. Concentric sphere.
Sure.
So based on this sphere, one point which seems to be strange to me is that the movie is always based on each individual. So even in Morocco family, they should be very connected, and the patriarchy as a father should have the power to control all the families. But the children do something wrong, which trigger all incident. That always the perspective is only based on the individual, which seems to be very Western, or it's not Western, not non-Occidental perspective. So
Okay.
this point really seems to.
Does anybody want to respond to that?
I think it's
like that on the surface, like it does focus on all the individuals, but then when you stand back, you see how everyone's interrelated. So like the Japanese hunter gave the rifle to the, so it kind of allows you to like look back, we were talking about this last night, but it was helpful, and see how small the world really is, and how even though you may focus on yourself selfishly and only think about yourself, what you do affects everyone else. It's like a ripple effect, and I think the movie kind of highlighted that by showing the connections between everyone. It was, I think, like you said, they didn't focus on the individual, but then the director kind of contrasts that with all these little connections.
Yeah, it really was about the tricks. They are connected each other individually, but the reality should be only about individually. So I wonder, does it really reflect on the reality or not? I wonder, does it really reflect on the reality or not? I wonder.
Should we all only think about
There is
ourselves?
really, we could connect, but we could not only connect individually, but also more like a family or.
Don't you get a sense of the family in the Moroccan episodes, or for that matter in the Mexican episodes? Isn't there a sense of the family there? What I think is true is that you always see things from a particular character's point of view.
Yeah.
But we are separate in that sense, aren't we? We have our own eyes, we have our own experience.
Yes.
But isn't there a difference in the social structures you see? That, for example,
Not really big as a social structure, but a little bit small, or like a local, or you can see the family or the people in a Mexican wedding party.
yes,
It's a situation that's totally different.
right.
But still always the eye of the movie is always focusing on the mother who just attaching the policeman or the guy,
Yes.
or like the friends or bride and groom, always based on each individual. So
Yes.
it seems to be a very Western perspective to me.
Nice. Okay.
Anyone know where the director is from of the film?
Mexican. Yes. Yeah, yeah, sure.
Related to Maria's view, I felt something very unhappy about the Western tourists because when they are taken to the Moroccan small village, they get very hostile to the people in the village, and they say, oh, they are kind of terrorists and they're going to attack us.
Yeah.
But in fact, they visited Morocco to feel something exotic or something different from their own homeland. But it shows that the tourists are going to see what they want to see, and they reject something unusual to them. But Mr. and Mrs. Jones was shot, so they were pulled in the different situation, and they felt the necessity of translation. So in the film, I felt something very ironic because Western people have to be shot to put them into a new relationship. It's difficult to tell what I really think, but
You put it very well. It's only being shot that will wake Western people up.
yes, if they weren't shot, there's no need of translation because they see what they really want to
Exactly.
see.
Yeah, very good.
So how we can think about being shot? This is
It's a
my
really good
question.
comment.
The same things happen about the Japanese people. When I was 10 or several years ago, it's really big news. And one Japanese youth went into the Middle East. He just went by himself, but just see,
What's
just
going
try
on in Iraq?
in a country, or just try to his courage. He could do it, or he could travel by himself, but
Kind of
after
adventure.
end up being captured by the terrorists or the other guys and cut his neck. And this videotape was YouTube or something, be in public. So the kind of same things happen. I cannot say it's the travel should not be a reckless or something like this, but if we would like to see something different, we might invade in a territory which we do not know what's happening. This is a responsibility. Like Pete said, your nation has a responsibility to take care of us. No, you have the responsibility to get into the nation which you do not know. Well, in my case, yeah, I am here in the UK. I have no idea about this nation, and I should have a responsibility. That's what I was told before I came to UK by my supervisor. You have the responsibility. You have to take care of yourself.
Okay. I'd still like to come back to the shooting, because I think what you're suggesting is that the plot would be very different if, for example, she'd been taken very ill. Suppose she suddenly had some serious illness in the coach had stopped, and the story unfolded from there. Then the same events could have happened in a sense. I think the local family would help that. But I think you want to attach more importance to the symbolism of this.
Yes,
that it takes a shooting.
Sure.
Yes. So the boy who fires at the bus is playing a crucial role in this chain of events. Does that mean that the Moroccans need to shoot at the...
I cannot say that.
Maybe the Americans need the pain, the physical pain to wake up. Because after the shoot, there was said, after this physical pain, they put them together. The couple could not communicate. There was a dialogue in which they said, what we are doing here? When she refused, I think, the ice that he put in her coke. And he said to be alone. Because they couldn't talk about the death of their child.
Yes.
And after the shooting, the way he took care of her, the way they could communicate through the pain, that physical pain that was hers, that then they reunited, even the body thing when she was urinating, and they were kissing at the same time.
Yes, sure.
I think that physical experience of the pain, I think they embodied things, and then they could communicate and get together.
Yeah, but related to this point, it was before the old woman who gave her this
Opium.
Release pain. But for me, it was like she started trusting in someone else. And also, what you say, when she created contact with her husband, because she started trusting him.
Because she had to, she didn't have a
She had
choice.
to, she discovered this kind of feeling.
Because he ran away when the child died.
Yes.
Maybe she wasn't true.
But she didn't trust in people. As you say, what is in this talk, this mother, she was very far from others. She didn't trust in others. In that moment, when it was that specific moment, but she did that period of her life.
Maybe she withdrew from the world when the baby died, and then she remarked with that experience.
At this point, it's connected with the Lost in Translation about the movie.
Go on then. Explain.
Yeah, because in the moment that they were husband and wife, but this for me was the same between Charlotte and Rob. They found some connection, they found some connection between each other, and in the same case, this couple found the connection again.
Yeah, about the connection to Lost in Translation, we can find hands as a metaphor for the connection. Like what's the name? I don't remember. Susan, before Susan was shot, she just tried to take her hands, but take off it.
Yeah.
Take off it soon after. And also we can find the father and the daughter. She was naked at the end of the movie. They were holding a hand.
Yes. Yeah.
It's also they tried, father tried to struggle to understand the daughter, but he could not. And the daughter did really stupid things a lot. but still try to holding each other by hands.
Yeah, but she did it.
But she did.
That moment was for me the moment of the asking for help.
Yeah.
The father was just waiting. And also then she asked.
Yeah. And yeah, hands, we can
Yeah.
find the hands as a metaphor for the connection.
Yes. Yes, it's true.
Although we are different, but we would like to connect.
Yeah.
Of course.
In this discussion, we tend to focus on the individual communication between the person and person. But I want to see it more narrative perspective. For example, when the Susan, American woman, shot, there is one story of American tourist. American go to the Morocco and the terrorists shoot her. And it is a kind of tragedy happened caused by the terrorism. And Americans tend to understand this incident as in the discourse of terrorism or capitalism. And we actually discussed in this way. But in the perspective of Morocco children and their father, it is a tragedy caused by the capitalism or the discourse of terrorism. So Morocco children and his father trying to criticize this kind of power or discourse, and the reality is not
They
different.
say we have no terrorism terrorists in this village.
Yeah.
But do you think that Morocco people in that area, they are aware about capitalism effect? Do you think that these people, I mean Moroccan people, in the movie, are they aware about the capitalism effect or capitalism impact on their life?
Yeah.
Do you think so?
Yeah, I think so. And Moroccan people,
But sorry, how can they be aware about that? If they don't go to school, they live their own life, there are no media, how they can be aware about that?
yeah,
How?
how?
Yeah. No, I don't know.
Okay.
Anna Maria doesn't believe that the Moroccan people are aware of the effects of capitalism. Because capitalism seems like our natural world, it's just there in the background. How would they be aware of these harmful effects?
They don't aware as in capitalism as American things,
Yeah.
but they feel they are very they have resentment to American power or big power, and they try to tell their reality differently from American talks. And I think it is a kind of Occidentalism. They have a reality in their life, and American people narrate our reality in different way. But
what is the truth?
sorry.
What is the truth?
Yeah,
Is there any terrorism in the story?
No.
No, okay.
Yeah, but there is no terrorism. But most people, in Japan and in America, they think there is a terrorism in the story. But Morocco people,
They create the idea of terrorism.
yeah,
Which is different. And this is instrumental to the capitalism of thinking. For me, it's very strong because rich people, in this case, Western, how the economy is now at this moment, I think in order to let approve from the outside everything is happening, they need to find some enemy. So in this case, I don't know if I'm enough clear in this point. If I found that some enemy, I can say, okay, it's your fault, and I'm right to do what I'm doing. And I don't think this is my opinion. I don't think that Morocco, in this case of movie, they were so aware about the effect of the economy and the effect of what they were doing there. They accepting these people. Otherwise, the poor man didn't accept this woman was going to die. Even he didn't want money at the end.
But that same thing difficulted or because Americans were presuming that there was some terrorists there, so they couldn't fly for the girl. So at the same time, their presumption was blocking the help to go faster. You see, because
I didn't read about that.
I
didn't read about that.
Right, because they couldn't go with, for her by the
No, if you are not fast to do something and you find every excuse you can. I don't believe about these kind of things.
So you don't believe that?
Because at the end they send a helicopter.
Yeah, but it took longer. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, they went.
Well, the way the guy from the embassy described it was that we couldn't trust the Moroccan ambulance. He said those words, that like we had to send the helicopter because we couldn't trust the Moroccan ambulance in that it might be connected.
But at the
to
same
terrorism
time,
as
they
well.
couldn't fly because they had
Yeah,
the permission for the airspace. So, that is an example for me that how this presumption or a stigma, maybe, like the other is wrong and I am right in both sides, it takes more or take us to more problems in our communications among humans.
Does anybody want to start a new topic? Someone hasn't spoken yet.
There is another.
I think the law is about violence, and you as David speaks a lot about violence too. And beyond the language and that was misunderstood. Connection, relation, communication can lead to a lot of violence.
So do you think the violence is coming from the discommunication between people, or there's no reason for violence?
In the general term, I
Yeah,
don't know, but
in
I
the
think
field.
in terms of misunderstanding. I lived in Beirut when it was the war, and it's always shocking me to see some violence because it reminds me this very scary time, and I believe that all war event is linked to misunderstanding, miscommunication, power, and which is linked to language, I guess.
Okay.
Because I'm researching about the children with disabilities, the girl who are deaf. It's kind of deaf. The first thing she said is, we are deaf, not blind. It means actually people who are deaf or people who are blind have a strong identity. They want to differentiate themselves from the other people with disabilities or the other normal people because they have a special skills, special abilities actually. So, and the perspective of the movie is always like cut out of all sounds suddenly, or just based on the point of the mouth. It's sometimes the movie focusing on the girl's perspective.
Yeah, very visual.
Yeah, visual perspective. It also tells me we think we understand the other, but actually the other is seeing should be different from we are seeing. So yeah, this is one part.
Thank you. I certainly think the fact that she can't speak is very important, isn't it? You know, can't speak normally. Anyway.
But about that,
Yeah.
she would like, because when she would like to be like others teenager. And this made me, she exaggerated her behavior in order to transcendence. It made me thinking about what we read yesterday about Derrida, that to try to be more than others in order to be equal. She made more effort in order to be equal to the others, and also she was not accepted. And this creating a very, very strong problem. She wanted to jump from the balcony. And I think it's in this movie, I don't know how to connect this, but it's about the sexuality of teenagers also, because it was connected with Moroccan girls and girls also.
For me, it's connected with citizenship.
Yeah.
We talked about citizenship yesterday, but like the girl want to be like a teenager as the others. She took a drug and she took like a whiskey or stuff like this, play and hang around with the gangs, the mobs in the park. The kind of things should be the right for the people who are living in Shinjuku or the center of the Tokyo. We sometimes treat the children as a special or differentiate with the others, but this is not what they want to do. They just want to be like the other people. This might reflect on what special people really want to do. I'm not really sure, but at least they are getting into the real use word.
So you're talking about inclusion?
Inclusion and exclusion.
How would it have been if she'd been blind instead of deaf?
It's not a blind, but I have a story about the Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It's kind of weakened or muscular, and at the end, the people who have to have a tube on the neck. But the other one guy, he wants to smoke with a tube. Other right to be a citizen in the country. So he just get out of the hospital and try to some stores with volunteer staff, get a cigarette and just smoke. It's almost like a suicide, but he wants to be like a citizen. Don't want to be treated as a citizen. Yeah, I don't have any people who are blind.
What do you think about that?
Because it was emphasized the sight a lot. And I was really surprised because when they took off the sound, as usually deaf people, it means that this guy was completely deaf, totally deaf, in comparing with others.
Yeah.
But I was really surprised that she could not listen at all. I mean, the vibration, because normally deaf people perceive vibration and also perceive this kind of music. They perceive also in the abdomen, and they didn't emphasize this point. So it means only the light. And this made me really very thinking about that, because how the director of the movie we perceive, the audience perceive our feeling, and how the light, I don't know this word in English, but how the light make her a little bit confused, because it was like a bomb, very, very strong, yes, really. And how she perceived the reality through this kind of light.
Yes.
I have a person who is blind, and she is studying in Sussex University right now. And her eyes were taken away, and her eyeballs were nothing inside.
Yeah.
But her appearance is really good, and she's joined the project which I'm involved with, like inclusiveness or exclusion, stuff like this. And she once said she doesn't really care about how she is called, like we call it special educational needs or stuff like this. She doesn't really care about it. All she wants is just do as the others do.
Yeah.
Yeah, she just remember.
Yeah, if I can add something. You asked before how it was, could it be if she was blind? Is it?
Yes, I'm trying to get the significance of
The
deafness.
importance of the sensorial work is completely different. Because here it was emphasizing sight, as I said before. With one blind person, it's completely different. The touch is much more important in the sound. The word is completely another.
Do you think you talked about sexuality just now? Do you
Yeah.
think this relates to that aspect of the story?
Yeah.
Can you say more about that, or anybody else want to talk about that?
Yeah, how she used this in order to appear more, to be more than normal people.
Yes.
And how she provoked also. She wanted also some attention from others using this part of her body. Maybe she wanted to explore her body, I don't know, this, it was not really clear. But it's related with her body. Why, for example, why she needed to be completely naked. I don't know why. She didn't provoke the policeman in the same way like she behaved with the dentist, for example. I don't know. I have a question about it.
Do you think she was trying to compensate the absence of sound to speak in another way using her body?
Yeah. To attract people, I think.
Because she communicated with them in a more emotive.
Maybe when she was, like, when they were all hanging out and, maybe, no, when they saw the guys, the view, they said it's a nice view, and the guys came over to their table, but once they realized that they were deaf, they went away. So I wonder if that has part of, like, she wanted to almost eliminate that step of, like, the acceptance. It's like, let's just skip straight to the, I'm just gonna be out there, and that was her way of getting rid of that awkwardness, which actually made it more awkward, but it was, I don't know, and maybe it was like overcompensating for that fact that that ability wasn't there, so I'll just be even more forward.
Yeah, the second step of the thing.
What about the detective, the policeman, whatever you call him? How does he fit into this, the way the movie comes about?
I think he was the first person that really gave her attention, and that was why she maybe reached out to him in that way and thought maybe this is finally my chance, that because he actually paid attention to me, that he would be more open or something.
But the attention, I think, like she wanted. The only one person who would pay attention to her in the way she wanted.
Yeah, because he was tempted.
Yeah.
It's not that he rejected her straight away. I think he felt a desire, but he said no, something different. He said no, you were just a girl.
But time to listen to her.
Yeah, but I think that at that point, they could communicate in a way that she used her sexuality to communicate with him, and he fell into that, but not to a further point. But when they communicate in that level, I think that's when she decided to write the note. But there was something sexual in that communication.
And how does he relate to the film as a whole then? You just said that he pays attention to her in a way that no one else has done. And he's a detective. How does that relate to the film as a whole? It's wrong with the plot, if you like.
It's always connected with the other thing, lost in translation. It was the same way of communication. Communicating, it is no difference. When we are, I think, when we are ready to listen to the other person, in every sense, not only words, but and to accept also the other.
So this is totally different from the American policeman, isn't it, who stops the Mexican woman, who, you know, he's not being correct in what he does, but he's following the rules. He has minimal Spanish, and then he's going to stop. Just go on with the rules. So there's quite a big difference, and this quality of attention is very important. I mean, doesn't the detective play quite a role in the way the story comes together?
Yeah,
Oh,
like
big difference.
he reveals, kind of before the truth is revealed to him. So like, he thinks that her mother jumped off the balcony, and that seems to be the truth, and everyone thinks that finally you know what happened, but then that doesn't end up being true. And then he also gets the truth about the rifle. I just think that at the end of the movie, he kind of, in a way, ties a lot of the stories together, and you find, it's like a closure.
Yes, that's right. So there's a slight uplift, isn't there, when you see his perception of this, and in a sense you've been led to his point of view, because you've gradually put these pieces together. So, someone said it was just very, very depressing as a film. Of course, a lot of bad stuff happens. But are there examples of goodness in it?
Yes, I think that sometimes, despite this difference between rich and poor, and the individual and collectivities, there is a kind of humanity shared. Like, for example, the Moroccan guy and Brad Pitt, when they're talking about wives, so how many wives do you have? So they show the pictures of the children. So I think there's a kind of comrade there. Men from such different cultures, they are going through the same kind of experience. And other thing that draws my attention as well is the children, how they communicate. So when the two white and blonde children were going through it, all Mexican children, and they were just embodied. They didn't say, "Oh, you are different from me," because they're clearly different. The children, maybe the language speaks is different. So they just put them together, and the children felt accommodated because they were playing and everything. So I think there's a kind of humanity that passes out the situation, that despite the globalization, I think something that's serious.
This is coming from the poverty, for people from to learn more about social classes, or it's just sometimes.
Yeah, because when the children, the white blonde children were first, they said, "Oh, go play with the other kids." The little boy looked like very frightened at first, like, I'm supposed to play with them. But then once he was in the situation, everything was fine, and they did have a way of communicating, and like it worked fine. But he looked a little bit scared at first, and that's probably because he's socialized to think that, I'm different from these people. But I also thought another way that you could see the links of humanity was through the sexuality thing with the Japanese girl and also the boy in Morocco, and it kind of made you realize that there are, even though, like you said, they come from totally different cultures, there's an underlying human nature that everyone had.
Martin, do you want to say anything?
Actually, I was just thinking about the way in which the film, I think, conveys the experience, ways of repaying or like sort of participating in a transaction. Sometimes can be the form of a gift or the form of money. I think what still seems to be a split between those, like for instance, the Japanese Japanese man who visits Morocco and participates in hunting, just likes to leave behind a sort of gun, this man. That seems to be sort of different from the way the American man, the husband, who tries to throw something, not throw, but tries to really, wants to say thank you to the man who looked after him, and tries to give him this money. And I think this, and in the same way when the Moroccan, so the man who has now this gun from the Japanese guy, who tries to sell this gun to his, sort of his neighbor, he says, like, I actually don't remember what the transaction was, but I think it was something plus a goat or something. So, yeah, I'm not really sure what to make of this, but I think there's a way in which these relations are very particular, or they seem to have some sort of resistance to money as a mode of exchange.
Thank you. Do you want to say anything?
Maybe something that hit me is all these beliefs about culture. That, as for example, yesterday she said, like, that she doesn't eat ham all the time, right? And when I saw the how they picture the Mexican culture, I was thinking it's not like that. these like ideas that are spread around the world about the culture, about different cultures. For example, Japanese in the other movie, I'm sure they are not only what we saw at that time. And for sure, what we saw in the picture of Babel is not what they say about Mexicans or Moroccans or Americans. It's not everything. It's just like one way of like the general perceptions, but they are certainly wrong, or these are incomplete, and this incompleteness tends to take us to problems in communication.
Do you mean the Mexican wedding party in particular? Is that volume? Is that cliche?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, the music was fine. It was fun. It's one kind of music that we have there, but they resemble like a very poor area, and we have those kind of areas, but we also have different contexts. And with as the time goes by, these kind of behaviors are less common. So because small villages are disappearing of our, but I mean, what I'm saying is that it's very difficult to really know a culture unless you are in that culture. You know what I mean? And all these images that we get in movies or most of the time are going to be short.
Okay, I wasn't listening to this, but thank you.
Actually, it's just not a question for everyone. Actually, as a film, because it managed to really, I mean, it was sort of magnanimous in the sense that it managed to capture all these multiplicities. But on the other hand, I think it's still sort of maybe, and this is sort of a question, but do you think it maybe perpetuates the sort of constant narrative that there's certain ills of globalization and capitalism, and it puts certain people subjugated to these sort of illnesses such as poverty, injustices, blah, blah, blah. But yet they're always seen as someone a bit more sort of communal, kind, sort of hospitable, and the Americans are sort of, participating, sort of the main sort of producers of this like sort of narrative of, producers of this power. So there's always sort of dichotomy between the West and sort of the people who are sort of subjugated to the ills of the West. And this film, I think, maybe might perpetuate this in the same way that so the sufferings of the Moroccans, of the Mexicans, just seem so much more exacerbated. And it seems to be something that we're constantly exposed to. And I think this is where maybe the depression comes in this, maybe. It makes it just maybe very impossible to overcome this sort of, or to give us any sense of hope.
Or maybe try to give another message to the exacerbate things.
Yeah.
It's for us not to lose sight that some things happen where they shouldn't be happening.
It's not just the West and the non-West, though, is it? Because we've got
Yeah.
Japan there,
And
which
so, yeah.
complicates this a lot.
I would say the American sort of maybe media maybe plays a big part in this as well. So.
I was just wondering how far the different cultures are represented as cliches, and I can certainly see what you mean about Mexico, which of course is ironic because Kyoto is Mexico. Says much, no less. But Japan's not presented as a cliche in this film. I mean, the very fact we've got deaf people at the centre of it, that also seems at the centre of it. I was just trying to go round, because I think you're making a very good point here. Is America presented as a caricature? Because the police behave in the way that you might predict, don't they? This kind of caricature of what it's like. But counterbalancing that is that Brad Pitt and Susan, they're not exactly, well, they don't fit into that police image, do they? Do you think I thought
No, but I also think that the way that Brad Pitt was reacting to the whole situation, like how can you not send an ambulance? Like he was just expecting that Morocco would be like America, which is I think a very American way of thinking, just assuming that the rest of the world should be like us. And I think he was, in the beginning he was like that, but once the people in the community started helping him and trying trying to do all that they could. I think that he started to see that the differences were a good thing. Like, I think he changed, but at the beginning, I think, and especially when she did that thing with the ice, when she threw out the ice and you don't know what's in that, or like, I want a Diet Coke, well, we don't have that here, and things like that. It was just very, I don't know. Yeah, she was, like you were saying, she didn't trust anyone, and that has something to do with, I think that's kind of an American.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
And is Morocco caricature? I thought it was presented as a complex culture, in a way that the American police force isn't, or the Mexican party isn't complex. Do you want to say something? Do you want to say you're on the point?
Because the beginning, I'm not sure, but in the beginning, I think the same music in the beginning and at the end. And I'm wondering why. I'm not sure, I need to listen to it again, but I think it was the same. And why? Because the character of music was quite dark in the beginning, and then it was the same at the end.
Well, that realization that
I don't know.
that comes when the detective was in the bar, or
No, the beginning of the movie, when it just started the movie, and at the end. And
when the was shown in the end, I don't remember.
yeah, it was when the subtitle one.
Oh, the hanging on
at
is
the end, the beginning and the end. Because I reflected on that, I was listening and I was saying, okay, they are changing the harmony, it's always the same harmony. It was very slow, very repetitive music with the same harmony, and it is the same at the end, I suppose. Why? Because normally when there is some ending, the music is different usually.
Maybe it's a metaphor for the possibility of things changing.
Yes.
Maybe.
Like, even though we're aware of it, we still don't have the ability to change it.
Anyone who's not spoken, want to say anything? Do you want to say anything? Saito? Julia? Okay. Other films by him are 24 grams? 24 grams is the title, isn't it? 21 grams. That's the remake. And also Amores Perros, I Love Dogs, or something like that. You shouldn't see that if you have a pet dog, but they're both good films. Have you seen them?
No, because I don't like depressing movies. So I don't.
Okay, I think we should have some lunch now, don't you? Now, could you 2 o'clock come back? Okay, good. So I would, well, you find your own solution today, because there's no market there, but there are shops around. In Russell Square, there's a little cafe, which I think is open today. All right, proceed. Thank you very much, everybody.